What's up, you guys? Welcome to Maverick Approach. I got a special guest on the show today, Paranoid American. You may have seen this face before, so he's on the show before. So how's it going, brother?
What up, man? Doing good. I'm doing good. I'm always joking about something, so I'm in a good mood today.
All right, cool. So we'll dive right into it. This whole situation with the Brazilian plane crash. Have you heard about that? Do you know anything about it?
Just a little bit. Yeah. So give me all the details. I got some weird observations that I dug up on it, but I don't know all the background details.
Yeah, I mean it's really weird. We'll bring up some articles in a minute, but just for overview, if you guys haven't heard, there has been a plane crash that happened in Brazil, traveling to Sao Paulo, and it had some interesting people on the flight. So there was about 62 passengers, and some of them were crew, most of them obviously were passengers, and some of those passengers were actually doctors. Now, they weren't just any doctors.
Mhm.
So let's go ahead and pull this up.
Yeah, this is what I had seen.
Yeah. Okay. So right here, it says 8 cancer doctors among the dead in Brazil plane crash. But here's the weird thing. Okay, so first, I want to bring this up right here where it says, um, so here's the wreckage right here, and it actually happened in like a residential area, and thank God nobody got hurt. And there's like a few videos of it. For one, it fell very oddly. Have you seen the footage how it fell?
Right, it wasn't like a normal crash, I guess, where it just keeps gliding towards in a spot. It almost does like a free fall at some point. Like it falls almost straight down at one point.
Right. And I've never seen a plane do that. I know it was like those twin engine type of planes, but the way it fell, it wasn't like this. It was just like
Yeah, it
that.
wasn't coasting, so it wasn't currently like flying, I guess. It had stopped, gotten to some sort of it almost looked like a tailspin that you'd see on a helicopter when it messes up
Right.
sort of like the negative pressure in the air, but this was a plane that was kind of exhibiting that same sort of fall. It was very odd, yeah.
It was odd. It was very odd. And when I saw that footage, I'm like, okay, that looks weird for one. And maybe it's the type of plane it was, because of the twin engines and whatnot. It just fell like this, like you said. Um, so that's the wreckage, right? So the passengers on board, it was a few cancer doctors. Now, the first report says it was 15 passengers or 62 people altogether. 15 of those passengers were, uh, I believe they're called oncologists, which is the study of cancer. And these were doctors headed to a conference. And the final report says 8 cancer doctors, seven of them changed their flight last minute. So I think they went earlier, which I thought was kind of odd. So I don't know if they knew something or it's just coincidence, but that happened. Like they actually, changed their flight. So only 8 of them actually perished, and like 2 of them I heard were like trainees, and the other one were like certified doctors.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like beyond just a normal tragedy. Anyone dying alone is going to be a tragedy, but now we've got like literal cancer doctors, which seems like they might be in short supply, especially for them all to get taken out at once. The fact that they were all on one plane and that some had changed their flights. Imagine if all of them had been on this, but it definitely made my like little conspiracy meter sort of bounce just a little bit
Oh
because I
yeah.
remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, right when they started having all those anthrax scares and people would get like envelopes in the mail and everyone was going crazy over this, right?
Hmm.
And during this small moment in time, there were 11 different microbiologists that all came to like very strange and untimely deaths. Like one dude like drove his car accidentally off the side of a cliff, and like all these different so like a very niche area of the medical industry, right? And to
Hmm.
just have like a huge swath of them gone. And it's kind of happening here, although because it all happened on one plane flight, coincidence or opportunistic? I don't know.
Well, like you said, like, you know, the cards in the conspiracy deck get stacked a little bit higher only because, check this out.
Oh, is there Illuminati card from the
No,
games? Okay.
I haven't checked yet.
A
I
bunch
haven't
of
checked.
doctors on a plane. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't checked it. I'll check. You guys know the Illuminati card game doesn't miss. So here's another thing too. So not only these doctors were on board, but you have, you know, and like I said, they were traveling from, I think it's pronounced Casaville to Sao Paulo. Now they're traveling to Sao Paulo because there is a conference that they were attending, right? Now this conference is called SBTMO, which is the Society of Bone Marrow Transfer and Cellular Therapy. So this conference is actually the standard for what's real and what's fake in the cancer treatment society and the industry at large. So for like any vaccinations, any cures or treatments, they set the standard on what's real and what's fake, which I thought was very interesting too. So here's their post saying, "Hey, you know, it's tragic. 15 passengers." So this was a couple days ago. They said 15 passengers were on board, or 15 passengers of the 62 were doctors. But I guess at this time they didn't know that those other 7 people, you know, weren't on that flight. So that was like, oh, okay, well, maybe they at first they thought it was 15 people, but ultimately it was the 8 people, or the 8 doctors. So that's another thing. I'm like, well, were they about to make a breakthrough? Was it something that they had some type of cure? I don't know.
Yeah, it will be interesting to know in the coming days that did any of them have a talk scheduled or were they giving any kind of present because they were on their way to the convention, right? So if anyone did have information to sort of break there, then they might not have that opportunity at this point.
Right. Exactly. Now, speaking of people who weren't on the flight, so check this out. I found out this is just like a an eerie type of thing, but this guy right here, he was supposed to be on the flight. Him and 9 other passengers actually missed this flight. So you know how they close the gate and you know they can't open it again by law. So him and a few other passengers were supposed to be on that flight as well, and he didn't make it. And I ultimately, like right away, I was like, what does that sound like? Do you remember a movie called Final?
Final Destination? Yeah, I knew
Yes,
it.
yes,
So this
yes.
guy's gonna have to be looking over his shoulder for the rest of his life, is what you're saying.
I hope not. I hope not. But yeah, like Final Destination. If you guys remember this movie came out in 2000. Wow, that's a long time. 24 years ago. So for all the younger audience, this movie's called Final Destination. Came out 24 years ago, and basically these people right here, the cast, these cast members, they were supposed to be on a flight. They all didn't get on, and then the flight blows up, and then death comes and takes them out because they were supposed to die and they didn't at that time. So that was a great movie.
Well, and that one, the guy has a premonition originally. Like he keeps falling asleep in this Groundhog Day situation where he falls asleep and he sees everything happen, and then he realizes he's living out exactly what he had just dreamed of. So
Right,
that was sort of him having some kind of weird insider knowledge. So he intentionally ends up not getting on the plane and causes a bunch of his friends. So that decision that he gets, like that insider info, that sort of is what sets the curse and Final Destination open, right?
right. Yeah, I instantly thought about that. I'm like, damn, that's kind of crazy. And like, he was actually caught on camera, like hugging the staff and telling them thank you for not letting me on the flight. Because usually those people were pissed, like, oh, I want to get on that flight. It's like this one time, it's like, thank you for not putting me on that flight or opening up the door, or allowing me to be on there.
What's crazy too is you said that 9 people ended up not making the flight, and if there was 62 on board, right, when it actually fell, 61 or 62. I've seen kind of mixed reports on this.
Yeah, I saw missed reports too.
But that means that like 15% of the flight didn't make it. That also seems like an anomaly. That out of 62 people, 9, right? That's more than 10% of the different people that would have been on it. So having 10%, more than 10% of people not show up for a flight, I don't know. I always have this like a score sheet of how many coincidences or how many weird anomalies can stack up in one exact event until
Right.
it starts to feel a little bit stranger than normal. So
True.
I guess we'll count this as like 3 or 4 at this point. The way that it fell, the fact that it was like cancer research doctors on the way to a conference, and this anomaly of how many people ended up missing the flight.
Well, not only that, let's add a little bit more to the conspiracy deck. So, did you know that not only that, um, it says right on here as well. Let's see if I can find it. So, 62 occupants, 58 were passengers, 4 were crew, 62 fatalities. So, it's actually more of a percentage because you got to take away that 4 members that were crew. Obviously, they're not going to miss the flight. So that the percentage that goes up even more when it's like 9 or 10 people actually missing their flight. So that's a great point.
Yeah,
But
that's 16%. So it's over 15% of the passengers that ended up not getting on board. Oh,
so there
10
you
out
go.
of 10. So it's over 15% for sure, yeah.
Wow. So they said they waited at the wrong gate. So that's kind of crazy too. What's even crazier, I believe it's on here somewhere, or I'll try to find it. Let's see if I can pull it up. It's actually, I believe it's on here, but
There's a 33 in that flight number too if you add the numbers up right.
oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a bad habit now where I go through things, but it's 2283, right? So 2 and 2 is 4, 4 and 8 is 12, 1 and 2 and the 12 is 3. So there's a 33 that's right there in the flight number.
Mm, good catch.
Not that
Damn.
it means anything. Just add it to the conspiracy deck, right?
Yeah,
Wait until we
yeah,
get like 50 cards up in that thing.
right. Well, I'm looking for it, but it says here, I read it in the report somewhere. I won't waste time trying to find it, but to add to the deck, this gets a little bit weirder. I don't know. You tell me. So not only there were doctors on that flight, cancer doctors, but there was a lawyer as well on the flight, and they specialize in none other than lawsuits against airlines.
So who's the
Oh,
collateral damage here out of the two groups? Is it the doctors were collateral damage for the lawyer? Or is the lawyer collateral damage? Or is just everyone collateral damage in a
it, it
horrible accident?
it can swing either way. The pendulum can go either way, right? So it's just kind of odd. It's like, what are the chances? Not like out of those 58 people, you have well, it's supposed to be 15, but 8 doctors and a lawyer, which is 9 altogether, who have something to do with either changing humanity or directly affecting, the airlines themselves. If they specialize, if they're good at their job, then they can take down certain airlines and whatnot. And the airline industry is actually a very cutthroat industry, and it's actually, I mean, if you just look at Boeing, I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole. But if you look at, any mega corporation making hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars, they have something to lose. And if you have a lawyer who specializes in lawsuits against airlines specifically, I don't know. That's it's a little suspicious to me.
Imagine what's going on in the head of a lawyer that specializes in airline crashes on a plane that's about to crash. There's
Right.
just like some really sick irony in that.
I know, right? I know. And then here's another weird thing too. So not only all that, then you have, which I thought was a bizarre thing too. So there was a Venezuelan family on board as well, and they had a dog, but they wouldn't let the dog on the flight, so they had to vaccinate the dog to get on the flight. Have you heard anything like that before?
Actually, yeah, dude. I've had to fly with a dog before, and in order to get the little dog ticket, which is it gets its own seat and everything. But in order to get the little dog ticket, they gotta have all their shots up to date. So if they include whatever the latest cocktail is in that little assortment, yeah, it's pretty standard. In fact, this might be one of the ways that a lot of people got compliant with like the whole thing is that if you had done a lot of international flights at any point, it's almost expected that you would get some of those. It's not necessarily mandated until you talk about dogs. With a dog, you got to show up and have like all the right paperwork.
Got you, got you. So that, I guess that makes it a little bit more sense because the dog has to, have its shots and make sure it's not, has rabies or whatever else.
I
Which is
noticed in the wiki page they didn't account for the dog. Did they not? Did we not account for non-humans in plane crashes? Like if it was a cargo plane full of dogs, would just none of those count?
I guess not because they said passengers 58. They're not even counting the dog.
Yeah, they don't even have like a little paw print or anything in the stats there.
No, they're like whatever, not human, all human casualties. But yeah, I mean they don't. I don't see anything about it. Like they mention it, but that's about it. All the passengers were Brazilian, although 4 passengers had dual citizenship, 3 Venezuelan and 1 Portuguese. Victims include 8 doctors, 6 of them were oncologist on board. Yeah, 4 professors and 1 child. So we had a couple of professors as well, right here. So a lot of prestigious people. So these weren't like just regular Joe Schmoes. So I have to look into like what these professors specialize in. But I swear, if it's something like something with health or something kind of crazy finance, like I wouldn't be surprised at this point.
Being critical about anything mainstream at this point.
That too. So okay, so we have 4 professors, 8 doctors. I mean, that's most of the plane. Then you had the lawyer. Like that's a lot of.
It seems like most of the people there. I wonder what the lawyer was doing there. Was he involved with the conference that they were all going to, or is this just another weird anomaly?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that they were. I mean, not that what I've heard of. Now it would be even stranger if they were all attending the conference. But for the conference just to mention the doctors, I'm assuming not, because they were like, "Hey, 15 people perished," and maybe they were just saying the doctors. So I don't think that they were linked. But it's pretty interesting. And another thing too. So the type of plane that they were on was this type of plane, an ATR 72. So ATR 72 is actually not Boeing. Surprise, surprise! This time, because at first
someone is at Boeing is like, thank God, finally someone else.
We're off the hook. So yeah, this aircraft, is actually manufactured in France and Italy by the manufacturer themselves, ATR. Now, here's the thing. ATR is actually half owned 50% by Airbus, not Boeing. But I would look into the manufacturer themselves versus Boeing overall because that's just the parent company. They're not actually manufacturing them. So this is the manufacturer. So I would look more into the ATRs, which is probably like a smaller, because I've never heard of them. It's a smaller manufacturer. And I don't know if they're going to go under at this point, but there's a lot of plane crashes. Have you ever heard of this type of plane before, or?
No, I mean I'm familiar with like military planes because I was in the Air Force, so I would like have to know what the sound of certain planes were going overhead. But I know very little about commercial planes. Just looking at this thing, it's sometimes it just blows my mind. But how like you would assume that there's all this technology involved, and there is, but a lot of that technology is like self-maintenance systems and detecting kind of things that are going wrong, and cameras and all sorts of sensors, right? But the
Right.
actual mechanics of getting one of these huge metal coffins into the sky and having it actually fly through the air, the technology for that hasn't really changed for like a century at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe around like the third, like in World War II, essentially. So by the time we had the 30s, but almost everything else related to flying, all of the technological improvements are just to tell you like how well you're doing and like what to shift. But the actual process of getting into the air and staying in the air and everything, it's very rudimentary, right? So uh,
Hmm.
it kind of regardless of the manufacturer, the technology on board, and everything, I think it almost always would come down to maintenance. And this one right here, it also said that there was some sort of an issue with icing on the
Right.
actual plane that seized up. So
Yeah, yeah, because I heard like there was like a report they were saying like as they were going up or before they went up there was like a I don't know if it was a storm or ice storm or something like that they were saying, but that's what I heard. But I mean, there's been tons of planes that go into like turbulent weather, but I mean maybe they were. I mean I don't know the specifics as far as like the weather. Like hey, get grounded, don't take this flight. They still went up, so maybe it wasn't that severe. So, and they said the pilot was very well trained. He had, he was a seasoned vet. So, no fault, so far on him.
I mean, there's very little that you can do if there's a catastrophic failure. Like you could be the best pilot in the world, right, in the universe, and if something mechanically goes wrong, I mean, you're talking about a huge freaking chunk of metal that's flying through the air at this point. Like if all he had to do was save himself, I bet you he probably could have, right? But
Right,
it's almost like those ships, like the captain's not allowed to just evacuate himself. Like you gotta go down with the ship in a way.
right. So here's another interesting thing that I found too. So there was a plane crash in Nepal, and it was the same plane. So this, I believe this was last year. I want to say, yeah,
Hmm.
January 2023. This actually happened in Nepal, and it was the same plane. So this this plane, I guess this manufacturer has a history because um, two plane crashes and within a year. That's not the greatest percentage, and I'm pretty sure like if you look into it more, there's probably more than that, or at least some kind of mechanical issues. But like if you have two plane crashes back to back, your stock isn't looking too good right now.
I mean, if we can get a little conspiratorial here, this reminds me too of remember when there was all sorts of bridges collapsing earlier this year and late last year. Not only bridges collapsing, they had trains that were being derailed. There was the huge one in
Yeah,
Ohio, I believe, right?
East Palestine.
Right. And there was also like toxic, I guess, gas that got released from part of that. And I really at that time, especially when the bridges started going left and right, it almost feels like this reminder that they're letting you know, "Hey, just FYI, remember how our infrastructure is crumbling? You know how these bridges keep falling? So if it happens again in the future, don't be too surprised. It won't just come out of nowhere. It won't be like the first bridge that's ever collapsed in over a decade." So now
Right,
we almost have that same thing happening with Boeing, and now with this Airbus sort of subsidiary, right? So you've got this same pattern where they're saying like, look, planes are crashing all the time. It's not that much of an anomaly. So if one goes down, hell, if one goes down that's got a large portion of like niche doctors on it, it's not that crazy. Even if it takes out a lawyer that literally specializes in airplane crashes, that's not an anomaly because look, it's been happening, every few months for the last few years. So there
right.
could be a little bit of that. Again, tinfoil hat fully on as I say
Oh yeah,
that, right?
oh yeah. They like when you set the trend, then it becomes less suspicious, I guess. But I think in the reverse. I think the more something happens, and there's more of a trend. That's not really a coincidence. A coincidence can be like, hey, I can throw a bottle behind me and not look, and it can go into a basket, and like, oh, what a coincidence! It went in one time out of 10,000 tries or whatever. But then it's like, okay, well, after the second or third time, it's like third time's a trend. What is going on? So that's when my ears start to perk up, because I try to be as critical and objective as possible, but then it's like, okay, well, this happened, and then now this happened, and this person was actually against airlines, and they were actually headed to a conference, that cures cancer, possibly. We don't know, but it's very strange when all the cards start to get stacked up.
Well,
And
that's
then
why I was mentioning that microbiologist one of like the early 2000s, because that one was an instance where 11 separate microbiologists all met these weird, untimely demises individually. Like it wasn't 11 of them got on a plane and the plane went down and took all like each individual of those 11 people were
Mhm.
all in a different area at a different time. So that's one of those ones that I feel that maybe they've just improved their techniques. Like it was way too obvious back then. They didn't realize that enough people were going to be going on the internet could share this information. So
Right.
now they have to change technique if that's what's happening, right? Like
If
you got to
Yeah,
be subtle about it.
right. Now, speaking of cancer, another like link that we were just talking about before we started was this situation. So the ex CEO of YouTube, um, now she just passed away from cancer, and I guess they were saying it was a 2-year battle. I saw some reports where it says turbo cancer, and I thought that was interesting because she died on the same day that this plane crash happened, which
Mm.
is August 9th. And I was like, that's pretty interesting. And then I looked into, her whole situation with her sister being the founder of 23andMe, which is interesting. And then her son, just passed away a few months ago. So I'm like, wait, what's going on? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm still connecting the dots. I don't know if it's related to this at all. Maybe not. But it is pretty interesting. It all kind of happened at the same day, and it has to do with cancer indirectly.
And I always think too, like if I let my mind like completely go wild on these things, but Sujin Wojcicki, I think that's Wojcicki. I believe that she kind of would represent like the top 1% of the top 1% in a lot of different ways. Influence, power, connections, money, all that.
Hmm.
But it and if you fully believe in like, she's part of this cabal Illuminati that pulls all the strings and everything, then how do all these bad things happen, right? Why does her kid end up, exiting stage right a little bit early? Why does she have this turbo cancer that she can't fight? What about all the resources and power and money? So either like truly, cancer is like the great equalizer in a way, or there's only so much power that you can have until you actually have connection to say like 8 people that get taken out of the sky that might have been able to help you. So I guess it's always one of those things that I thought in my head, like if like like a David Rothschild gets to like super old age, don't they just have like a little cryogenic chamber they can slip into and
That's
be
what I.
reborn? It's like a 20-year-old, or because if anyone had those kind of resources, I would assume the ex CEO of YouTube would have been one of those kind of people with those resources.
Well,
So
here's the thing. So she was worth in 2022 $765 million. So you have access to a lot of stuff that the average Joe doesn't.
like,
I'm
can she not just buy a whole new body, or do we not have that technology yet? Because it feels like she's got the money to buy a new body if the technology existed.
right, and she's in the technology field. Not only that, her sister is named, and I'm not gonna butcher her name.
Right, her sister could even source the perfect body to put her into, right? Because of the 23andMe.
Could be. I mean, she's CEO of the personal genomics not country uh company 23andMe, founded in 06, and she was married to, or she is married to, the founder of Google, which is another thing. So they're all pretty high powered and rich and everything else, but again, they got to have some type of something that we don't have access to. Now, I've been hearing things to where it gets wild, to where cloning, transfer of consciousness, all types of stuff. And I do find it interesting that the 23andMe deals with genetics. And what else are they really doing? I mean, do they have some type of like dark project that they're, gathering and taking, people's DNA? And
Definitely. I'd say definitely they are.
I would think so. I would think so. What is 23andMe actually worth? Let's see. The revenue is 192 million, operating income 681.
But see, I almost would assume that the revenue that we're talking about here is like retail slash consumer based, and it probably is not including how much they charge for intelligence agencies to have sort of backdoor access to all their data. You know what I mean? And I would
Uh,
assume that that is probably where either their financial capital or their political capital probably dwarfs whatever people out there are like signing up for the service and sending in $100 with a pinprick.
right, right. Because this isn't like astronomical numbers, but you're right. Anything that has to do with like business to business, government, um, I don't think they can even, like, I mean, they wouldn't have to disclose it if we just, if it's not public, because anything private is completely different. This is a public traded company, so it has to be on the books. But anything that's not on the books, obviously, is private, and who knows what they're doing. So I don't know. Food for thought.
Oh, there was a note in there too as you were looking through. It said in 2020, 23andMe was involved in trials with GlaxoSmithKline, or I can't remember the conglomerate's name, but it was specifically identifying cancer.
Oh, really? Let's see. Uh,
If you do a search for cancer, it'll probably come up on there. It
uh
was something in 2020. They had just done some sort of a trial.
Interesting. Okay, here we go. 23andMe launches new genetics report on common forms of cancer. Interesting.
And I mean, let's not undersell how much of a moneymaker oncology is worldwide. But it's if someone were to figure out the cure for cancer, or at least some kind of like a legit preventive maintenance, it would be an absolute game changer across the board, right? It would probably reverse a lot of trends that we just have baked in for human mortality rates. So if
Right.
anyone, and that's one of the oldest conspiracies in the books, I think, is that the medical industry has some sort of a solution to this, but they just mowed it over in the rainforest or something. Like they found the one tree that could cure it, or the one weird beetle in the Amazon, and they just they just destroy it so that no one could ever find it again. That's like one of the most OG conspiracy theories.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, being what happened in Brazil is just like adds to that. It's like, okay, what if they were onto something? They may have may not been. We don't know. It could have been just like they're doing research. Maybe coincidence, but just looking at this, it's like, what if a company like 23andMe wants to be the founders of a cancer cure or whatever else, but it's really already been out there. We got some guys in Brazil or somewhere else who already found it. They were going to break it. It's like, well, let's tie up some loose ends and we'll be the ones to go ahead and capitalize off of this and string them along. And, it'll be a treatment first, then a cure, and we'll milk everybody.
It
So,
seems like it would be a very dangerous thing to discover, would be the cure to cancer. Like I would, if I found the cure, I would immediately be concerned for my well-being, right?
oh,
Because
yeah. Yeah.
like
It's like
I
a
wouldn't
guy.
take planes. I wouldn't go in
I
anywhere that
was
doesn't have tinted windows.
Dude, I wouldn't even tell anybody. I was like, have a small knit group. I wouldn't even tell anybody. Like, that is dangerous. It's like that guy. I don't know if you remember. Shoot, what's his name? But he basically created a car that ran on water, and then he had a meeting and with some investors, and basically that was his last meeting. As that meeting concluded, he walked out and he started holding his chest and his neck, and he was like, "They poisoned me," and that was like his last words, and then he died. So I don't know who those investors were or whatever else, but it was very strange because like he had a very functional model of a hydro car, and then he was done kaput. So
I mean, we might as well include another classic example. This one too of all of Nikola Tesla's papers being burnt in a fire after he died, before they were able to capture the information and give it to anybody.
right, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's pretty interesting. I don't know. You just have to look at these things. It's like, okay, well, cures of cancer, hydrocar, and then people just start getting knocked off.
I wonder too, man. A little bit more like woo woo in area, but if you actually believe that negative thoughts or negative energy has any impact in somebody, right? Imagine all of the trolls that Susan Wojcicki, like all the enemies that she made from being CEO of YouTube and getting people taken down and livelihoods made and destroyed and all the censorship that went along with that. So she was very much a public figure, like a public scapegoat to take on all of that negative energy that anyone had towards YouTube. She was ultimately, I don't know, could that possibly be a cause for turbo cancer? Is if you've got like literal millions of people that wish ill upon you constantly? I don't know. Have there been any studies on that?
I saw that. I saw that, and people were like saying like some disrespectful stuff, and like I don't believe in that. I don't think you should like speak on the dead like that. And even if she had an agenda and whatnot, but people were saying some wild stuff on X. X is a crazy place, by the way. It's completely uncensored, and people were saying stuff like, "Oh, you were, stifling, free speech and everything else," and they were just saying like crazy stuff about her. But I don't know. That's a great point, though.
And the whole aspect too of like mind over matter, like even people that have beaten the big C on their own, right? A lot of them attribute just like a positive mind state and mentality and just thinking you can get over it and basically like fighting against it. So I mean, if that has any modicum of truth, that positive thinking can help you overcome it, then I almost have to assume that like having all the negative energy piled on top of you constantly, you can't even check your public social anything without seeing that constantly. It probably doesn't help. Like I don't know if there's a medical link to it causing or making anything worse, but I would almost assume that if they did a study, they'd be like, well, it definitely doesn't help to wake up and just be surrounded by vitriol constantly.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And it's a collective conscious type of thing. I don't think that helps at all. Like it's all negative energy, like sending your way. So I can say, at least for myself, I would think it would attribute to that, because only 2 years, and then when she started her battle, like that's pretty fast. Like even with all the money she had, all the treatments and everything else, like getting taken out in 2 years, that's
And
pretty
months after her kid went away before her, which is, it
that,
reminds me too of like the old couple. This happened to my grandparents too. Like old couples that'll be living together for years, and then one of them declines or passes away, and then the next one, it's like bam, like clockwork, and it's almost like that was the last thing that they had keeping them going. And once you remove this extra boost that's like making you want to keep going, it's
yeah.
almost like there's like a switch that you can hit that says, all right, I'm ready. And I mean, I don't know if how science links into that too, but I mean, so many people where they go and they say their final everything, and usually the person will be like, okay, I'm ready to go, and then they go. Like how do you do that? So I don't know. Maybe there's another aspect of this, and Sujin Wojcicki's untimely passing too was
Yeah.
beaten down by the world, beaten down, internally from family trauma.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I mean, like we said before, like her son passed away a couple months before. Reports say that he overdosed, so that takes a toll. I mean, I know from personal experience, because my godparents, um, they passed away just months from each other. One passed away in March, and then a few months later, the other one passed away. So it's like it does, correlate like that. It does happen like that, to where that those people are connected, and that's kind of like the last thing that they had. And it's kind of like they kind of go within that shortest span of time. So
And it's just a little energy meter. It's like a video game, right? It's like every bad thing that happens to you can ultimately take away from your little energy meter if you don't know how to replenish it.
right, exactly. Life is a video game, man. Life is a video game. But we'll go ahead and wrap it up, man. I appreciate it. It's always fun. Let the people know what you have going on. I believe you have. Let me go ahead and bring your screen up, and tell us what this is.
Oh yeah. So for the last month, I've been doing a whole bunch of movie reviews and podcasts on Stanley Kubrick and the moon landings, but it's all been in promotion for this comic book that I've been working on for over 5 years. You can see it at nasacomic.com. And this week, if you're watching it, the first or second week of August here, I've currently got a campaign, but it's only going for the next 3 days. So it ends in 72 hours. But it's basically a 40-page comic book about Stanley Kubrick, the Apollo moon landings, CIA involvement, but it also has these like really deep inside references to all sorts of conspiracy moon Kubrick related stuff. Like for example, there's an image here where there's a concept that the Beatles tried to approach Stanley Kubrick and asked him to put them into a Lord of the Rings musical. But Kubrick turned him down because he was busy with 2001 Space Odyssey or perhaps the Apollo missions. But in the comics, since we've got the freedom to sort of theorize what it might have looked like, we actually look and see, okay, what if Stanley Kubrick had directed Lord of the Rings with the Beatles in it? So we got examples of that. We've got examples of the monolith and all sorts of inside references. I got a variant cover that's got characters from all the different Stanley Kubrick movies on it. The Shining and Full Metal Jacket, Eyes Wide Shut. It's like completely loaded up with all these references. And the
That's
coolest thing is this Apollo 11 embroidered patch that some of them are going to end up coming with, and it looks it's got the exact same color palette as the Apollo 11 mission patch, but instead of the American Eagle, which is on the original one, it's got Stanley Kubrick with his little film camera on the moon filming the Earth. So yeah,
that's
it's this thing that I've been working on for a really, really long time. It's finally here, 40 pages. And yeah, I'm just gonna keep adding to the freaking Paranoid American library of comics and conspiracies.
nice, nice. Did you see Fly Me to the Moon?
I did, yeah. I've been waiting to do a decode on that one with Tommy Truthful, but yeah, I've seen Fly Me to the Moon, and I've got a whole decode on that. I think that there's a really consistent imagery that's it's basically about masonry, and masonry and that and the Apollo 1 mission. Because have you seen Fly Me to the Moon?
I did. I did. They
Okay, so
actually in Kubrick in there too.
they have a nod to Kubrick because the whole premise is that they're doing a backup. I got so many thoughts on this one. So Fly Me to the Moon is a good example of the government doesn't have to disclose. Say, let's just assume that the government did fake the moon landing footage that we saw, right? They
Right.
don't ever have to disclose it officially at any point, and they don't have to spend that political capital doing it. If there's just enough popular media that comes out that just makes people like, oh yeah, of course we faked it. So then they wouldn't ever actually disclose it because it's kind of ubiquitously understood that yeah, maybe the footage was fake, or and the longer the time goes on, the more you can just kind of lean into it. And then at some point in the future, maybe after we're all dead and gone, but there could be a government response. It's just like, of course it was fake. Like you didn't really, but no one actually believed that at any point. So that's
Yeah,
what
the
Fly Me
movie
to
was
the Moon is,
oh.
right? Yeah, I guess I'm part of that too. But like, Fly Me to the Moon is sort of part of that aspect. But there's
Right.
a dark undertone to the Fly Me to the Moon because they keep referencing the Apollo 1 missions, and they show the plaque that's got all the guys on it and like the bronze
Yeah.
plaque, and they keep showing this damn black cat over and over again. Well, that black cat in my mind is a direct representation of like a reminder that everyone might just incinerate on this mission, because that's what happened in the Apollo 1, is that the guys got locked inside the cabin and it lit on fire, and they basically, it was not the best way to go essentially.
That's
But
terrible.
everyone involved in that original mission, like the guy that was originally headed up, he develops dementia praecox, which is early onset schizophrenia slash dementia from the stress that he went through. But there's also this really weird, eerie picture, man. If you look it up, of the original 3 Apollo 1 astronauts, and they're all like praying, with their eyes closed and their hands up like this around a table, praying to the little lunar or the little module that they ended up dying in. And they were around this table praying to this thing, and it came with a caption. It was like, "We don't trust you." It's like, don't hate us, but we don't trust you. Talking to the mission commander that ends up going crazy. So I know the weird prophetic aspect of the very first mission of Apollo 1. They don't really talk about why they keep giving it so much attention, Flying Me to the Moon, but I think that's what the movie is really about, is about the Apollo 1 landings.
Oh, yeah, they did reference it a lot. And like the head director, launch director, he was like going to the little, like you said, the plaque a lot and planting the plants there and stuff. Like he was really distraught about it. So they did reference that a lot. You're right. So I thought that was interesting, and how the black cat kept coming about, and they were like, well, yeah, we're gonna use this for a backup and everything else. We were never gonna use the actual footage and everything else. And then in the end, spoiler alert, uh, they end up, cutting the feed by accident, and it was the real moon landing, and that's what everybody saw. But they were like, man, it looks so fake, and they were making jokes about it and how fake it looked, even though it was real. But to be honest, if you guys listen to Californication by Red Hot Chili Peppers, they even reference it. They said the moon landing was in a Hollywood basement and everything else. And you just got to look at the signs. I think personally that this is what happened, that they had bit off more they can chew. And then they were like, you know what, let's just fake this whole thing, and let's actually try to, make this thing happen, because we don't want, the last situation to happen. So let's go ahead, fake this, and let's get to the moon. Let's beat all the other countries, Russia and China and everybody else. Because that's what it's about at the end of the day, right? Who can we beat?
Who can fake the moon landing first?
Yeah.
It's a fake space race to who can fake it first.
Yeah, because think about it. The technology they had back in the day, they said that the computing power on the mission was basically what's in a calculator today. Like that type of computing. Like there's no way a little tinfoil thing can go all the way thousands of miles, go there and then come back. Like, I don't think we had that technology back then. And if we did, it wasn't publicized, and we were using alien technology and spaceships to go back and forth, and that would never be televised. So that's my theory.
I don't know if you ever seen Capricorn One, which is the fake landing movie with O.J. Simpson in it. I think Burt Lancaster, a bunch of other people. But that one, they're supposed to be going to Mars instead of the moon. But the whole premise of that movie is that the American public is sort of upset at this point because they've been putting so much money into the space program and NASA for decades. And now people are starting to ask, okay, like where's all this money gone? Where's the moon landing? Where are all these space missions? So the very beginning of Capricorn One, the flight director is telling them, look, we partnered with this company that was supposed to make this doodad, and they made all kinds of money on it, but maybe they made too much profit because the thing doesn't work. And if we actually send you guys into outer space with this part, then you're all going to die in space. So instead of losing face and coming to the American public and saying, hey, sorry, the last 10 years have all just been a big waste of time and money, not only would they shut down the space program, but it would probably be shut down with prejudice to where they'd never be able to open one up again and would just go to private industry. So the whole plot of Capricorn One is for NASA to save face and maintain government control over the space program by faking this thing.
I've never heard of this movie.
It's so wild because they show you almost in real time where the NASA astronauts, they're in the next room, literally, like they're in the room next to the command console, and one of the engineers that's working in there is basically tracking the delay between when they're talking, when they're hearing, and he realizes that they can't be far away, like they're not even more than like 3 miles away. So he gets taken out, and then the astronauts are listening to all this footage, right, where it shows like, oh, here they are on the moon, and here, talk to us. How is it like being on the moon? And they're listening to the radio, and they're in this room, and one of them's like, hey, this is taking a while. Like we should have already been able to go back. So as they're in this room, in the room directly next to them, they're announcing that the heat shield deteriorated and that all 3 of them were incinerated. So you actually see them in real time where they're clearly alive. They're in this room next to the studio, but they're saying like, we're dead right now. Like they just killed us by just saying it. And there's this weird, profound idea, right? That if you said that you're dead and the entire country heard that, now it's like not an anomaly if they never see you again. So like they can kill, like it's your second death before your first death. The second death is the last time anyone says your name, basically. But in this movie, they show that they can give you your second death before you're actually dead. It's a wild, wild movie if you watch it under these lens, man.
I gotta check this one out. Yeah, definitely. And it
And
has
again, it just shows how ubiquitous the idea that the US government was. I don't know if the entire thing was fake, but just the idea that it wasn't exactly as it was described. It's ubiquitous to the point where if you watch almost any cartoon and they reference moon landing, there's always a joke about it being fake. And there's so many different movies and plot lines about it being fake that again, it's feel like this very slow, soft disclosure because that's kind of what really happened.
that's how they do it, man. They always put it in the movies, the music, the TV shows. They always drop these little nuggets. And like, if you guys don't know, like the Pentagon actually has a film fund where they work directly with Hollywood to tell the stories correctly, or certain information has to be correct to depict certain things. So they have a hand in all this stuff for sure. So that's why I always pay attention to movies and media and everything else, TV shows, so I'm like, what are they really trying to tell us? And like, it's so detailed and it's so good and like scripted to where it's like, that really could happen. But oh no, it's a movie. Don't worry about it. So that's kind of how they, play on your emotions. Like it's just a movie. That's
Well,
how they.
and they used to be subtle about it. Like usually it wouldn't be declared, or they'd almost like hide the connections that the Pentagon or the CIA in a lot of cases work directly with the screenwriters. But now we've entered this weird, bizarre world in the last like 2 decades where like American Sniper will come out, or some other military movie will come out, even Top Gun. And instead of it being like a secret connection, they'll actually put it in the advertisement. It's like, we had an actual CIA advisor work with us, and people are like, oh man, that means it's going to be super authentic. Hell yeah, you know what I
Right.
mean? So it's like the connection between, just like there was the military industrial complex. Now there's basically like the military entertainment complex, and that one's not as hidden as the military industrial one.
Right. Right. No, yeah, it's crazy. Like even like that other movie, I think it's called Shooter with Mark Wahlberg. That one too. That one is like very, like you guys got to watch that movie. I don't want to give it away if you haven't seen it. It's an older movie, but that one's very telling too. So I
What was the one that the Obamas helped produce on Netflix? Was it?
Leave It Behind. I just watched that again. I watched that movie like 4 times. I
So
found some new.
that's another example where it's not hidden because it's a selling point. Like, oh, we got the actual president to help consult us on how this would go down. So instead of it being this like planned programming or soft disclosure revelation of the method, it literally turns into a bullet point in their marketing sheet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that movie, man. I always say that movie's a documentary. That movie's not a movie. It's just not for entertainment because a lot of stuff has came to pass already with the blackouts, the Tesla recalls,
The NASA scene with the NASA shirt,
the
right?
oh man, that like there's so many different things. Like it's strange, but but yeah, I know you gotta head out. But yeah, let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
ParanoidAmerican.com is probably the best place. It'll all flow out from there. I'm at Paranoid American on most platforms, maybe without the N, Paranoid America on TikTok and X. Although I just got a lifetime, well, a 10-year ban from TikTok. We'll see how that
I
goes.
saw that. That was insane. I never like you had to break a record on that.
You know what's funny though? I found there's a certain way that if I go into like the business app of TikTok and I switch to another profile and I start a post and I switch to my original one, I can complete it and still post it, even though I've got like a, maybe I shouldn't be saying this out loud because they'll try to
No,
patch that.
not at all. Not at all. You already gave away too much, but
Yeah.
that's
You can
great.
find me on paranoidamerican.com, and the comic book I was talking about is at nasacomic.com, 40-page comic. And even if you're listening to this in the future, it'll be available on wherever I get that thing pointed to.
Yeah, I'll drop all the links below for you in the description. So make sure you guys check that out. Make sure you hit all his links, hit all my links. Follow me on X and Twitter. You guys know where to find me. I'll leave all the links below. Make sure you guys text MAV, M-A-V, to 26786. I'll text you guys anytime I go live, new videos, anything I have going on. And thank you for joining me. Like, I appreciate it. It's always fun. We'll definitely do this again for sure.
Likewise, man. I got to have you over for the next one. And I guess parting wisdom: if you are a lawyer that specializes in airplane fatalities, don't fly on an airline that has had a crash in the recent history. I don't know. Maybe just a rule of thumb.
Yeah, just a nugget right there. So something to think about. But make sure you guys question everything, and I appreciate it. Thanks.